Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. I absolutely love that part. So I was just waiting for that part to actually come on before I went down. Welcome back. It's your Urban Woman Show with me, Razia Rainwich. Do hop onto our screens. We are live now on Facebook, YouTube, as well as on the airwaves of Radio Al Ansar International. We're talking about something very important. We hear about self-care, and sometimes I think we don't take it seriously enough, but this time we're actually shifting it to a very important dynamic of our society, and that is the matriculants. So matriculants and matric pupils are actually urged to prioritize self-care. Let's understand why. Now, as matric pupils across the country wait anxiously for their results, the pressure can feel overwhelming. For many young people, this period is filled with uncertainty, fear of disappointment and disappointing loved ones, and also questions about what the future holds. To help us unpack this very important topic and to also understand why matric pupils are urged to prioritize self-care, we have Dr. Fred Schouwink, who is an educational psychologist, joining us on the screens and on our airwaves. Good morning, Doctor, and welcome to Urban Woman on Radio Al Ansar.
Good morning, Razia, and what a wonderful topic to talk about, and I think very relevant considering the matric results are coming out soon.
Absolutely. And sometimes as much as there's this anticipation, there's a lot of sadness that follows, sad news that we hear, and we think, oh man, only they realize how much they have in front of them. It's like their whole world, but many define their lives just on this one result. So I think it's so important we unpack that, Doctor. Now, this waiting period after exams can be incredibly stressful. What is it about this time that actually makes matriculants particularly vulnerably emotional?
So, Razia, I think a good place to start this conversation is just to normalize this anxiety, because the moment that we have to wait for something, we typically get anxious, and especially if something is very important for us. And I think a lot of matrics for this time for them certainly is an intense uncertainty, because they've put their effort in, but they still don't actually know the outcome, and the daily structure of working and studying, that's all over. But there is, in fact, still pressure and anticipation that remains. So what we know, this beautiful thing of ours, our mind, it tends to fill that silence with what ifs. And it can often come up with these worst case scenarios. And just keep in mind that teenagers, that brain is not fully developed yet. We know from the research that teenagers only, the frontal lobes really develop only about 23, 24. So they don't really have the full emotional regulation. So uncertainty, not knowing, it can feel especially overwhelming. So, and we know anxiety is more often than not worse than the actual outcome. But I do want to say that reaction is quite normal. It's not a sign of weakness or failure.
Absolutely. Mums, dads, if you're listening in, get your kiddos to listen as well. Some learners tie their self-worth entirely to their results. Now, how dangerous is that mindset, and how can young people begin to separate who they are from a single exam outcome?
Yes. It's so risky because it reduces your whole personhood to one set of marks. And, often that disappointment can feel like a judgment on who they are, not just on how they performed. So I think we know that exam measures, like matric exams, they really, if you think about it, they only measure your performance on a specific day, under specific conditions, and it's not a reflection of your intelligence, your worth as a human being, your value, or any future potential. So very important that you do separate that identity from the outcome. And I think it starts with, that inner voice where you do tell yourself that these results that I'm going to be getting, they describe my academic performance. They do not define my character, my worth, or my future. So, naming your strengths outside of the academics, all the other things that you've achieved, your friendships, your relationships, your creativity, your resilience, all that helps to see your identity more holistically rather than just a set of marks.
So important. So important. Name all of your other strengths because there are so many and it doesn't need to diminish or disappear because of the academic performance. Now, sadly, doctor, we've seen cases where learners resort to self-harm or even suicide when results aren't what they expected. Now, from a psychological perspective, what drives someone to that point?
So, Razia, often in clinical practice, I've seen that it's rarely about the results alone when it comes to, some teenagers that just feel so overwhelmed where they do resort to self-harm.
Mm.
And really, if you think about it, there are four reasons that it's often linked to. One of them, probably the most important ones, is the fear of shame or letting others down. That's a very big driving force. Also feeling very trapped and not seeing visible alternatives, because what does
Mm.
anxiety do? It gives like that tunnel vision. We don't see beyond the alternatives, or they believe that the future is over and this is it. And also, what I've seen with the teenagers that I've spoken about, often they lack just safe spaces to express their distress, and that emotional pain then escalates because of these factors, and the person feels alone and unheard. And I think so important that that connection and reassurance can significantly reduce that risk for teenagers to turn to self-harming behavior.
Absolutely. And the sense of judgment as well. You started off with a very important point. I think, yeah, what will people think of me? And sadly, I think with the social media, this is becoming more apparent. That is why there's this filters and this glamorized kind of a living. It's all about so other people have a better perception of me. So also that comes in. For learners who already feel they didn't perform well, how should they manage the constant fear of disappointment, both their own and their families?
And that disappointment, it can be quite significant. So, Rosie, if I can use a metaphor, fear of disappointing others, it's often like you're arriving at an airport, and you realize you're carrying bags that actually don't belong to you. Some were
Yeah.
handed to you with love, others with expectation, and you just keep on carrying these bags, and you think that that's your responsibility. So managing the fear means deciding which bags are mine to carry and which do I actually need to put down. So we have to separate those expectations I have of myself and those that others put on us. And I think to recognize that fear, often we have to think about that imagined future, because
Yeah.
that's where a lot of that anxiety comes from. What will people think if they hear all of this? And it's important just to be in the present moment and really to limit that result talk, as I call it, that social comparison, because that can really just fuel all those thoughts of I'm not good enough. And, that's just really important to remind yourself that disappointment is an emotion. It's not a disaster. And sometimes families do struggle initially,
Yeah.
but
Mhm.
most often they want to help and they don't want to judge. So I think those short, honest conversations often reduce that fear more than the avoidance.
I love that. Disappointment is an emotion, and emotion is energy in motion. You need to have that talk. You need to process it. You need to get through that so you can go on to the next stage. And then it's a where to from here. I mean, anxiety is actually, worst case, future, what can I say? Future pace, worst case scenario. We're always thinking the worst. And as you said, the actual experience is not as bad as what that anxiety puts out there. And so important for us to live in the present
That's
moment because
it.
we definitely use our own life then. And thank you so much. I love that metaphor that you used. Which ones are your bags and which ones do you need to let go of? Just remember that and carry your own bags and lighten that weight. Doc, when it comes to parents, what can you share with us with regards to the roles that parents play at this stage? And what should parents avoid saying or doing that might unintentionally increase pressure on their children? Because parents do come from a good space. They mean
Mm.
well, but some can come across and be interpreted and received in a way that could be harsh.
Mm.
What would you say regarding
Parents,
that?
more often than not, are coming from a really good place. They want to help, but they're also sitting with their own anxiety, and worries around it. But I do want to say to the moms and dad listening, you are the emotional shock absorber for your child, and you can't always remove the bumps in the road, but as a shock absorber, you are just stopping that bump from throwing them off balance. And the most important thing is just that calm and steady responses. Not helpful to catastrophize and say, well, now there's no future. Oh my goodness, what are we going to do now? And that panic, because that just creates even more panic for your child. But what is
Mhm.
helpful? Something like, we care about your marks, or we care about you more than your results, at least. We'll figure out this together. Um,
Yeah.
I think those are really, really important messages for your child to hear. So it's that presence that you bring, the reassurance, and as I said earlier on, there's so many options these days. So if things didn't quite
Absolutely.
go as they would have, you know,
Mm.
acknowledge your child's feelings. We say in psychology, relate and connect before you correct. And that's why that
Mm.
emotional attunement is important. And then we get to the problem solving of, all right, what are our other options?
Where to from here? Relate and connect. I love it. I mean, imagine if we were in that situation. Doctor, can you remember when you finished Matric and then you were waiting for your results? I think we can all go back and reminisce at that
Absolutely.
time, right?
Rather
And
it's very anxious that time.
absolutely. And it's that support that makes all the difference. And
Mm,
knowing that, you know what,
yeah.
I am not being judged by this. And let's be honest, to be honest with you and, all the matriculants that are out there and listening in, or parents that are listening in, there's many of us that have studied things after school that we are nowhere near doing any of what we've studied. So I have a degree on my practice, well, basically a BCom, HR BCom degree that I'm not using. And,
Mhm.
life does steer you into the path that you need to be doing. So I'm doing holistic healing and coaching and so forth. And look, I'm on radio as well. But wherever you need to be, life will take you there. It's about trusting the process. And I think it's going to be wonderful, Doctor, if I could just also ask you to come in there. What message would you like to share directly with Matric pupils who are listening right now and feeling anxious about what lies ahead?
Rosia, I think the most important thing is that whatever you are feeling right now, it makes sense. And it feels heavy and it is uncertainty, but it's normal to feel this because it's important. And
Mm.
remember that the results are just information, they're not a verdict on your life. And there are multiple pathways forward. And I'm so glad that you've mentioned your journey. Rosie, the recent research shows us that most young people entering the workforce will change their job focus about 6 to 8 times. So
Look at
what
that.
this new world of work needs is flexibility and adaptability. So it's a starting point. Whatever you're going to do this year, it's a starting point, but adapt. And yeah, I just want to say to our students that are listening in, you don't have to carry this alone. Speak to someone you trust, and remember your worth is not decided by an exam, and your story is far from finished.
Absolutely. Your story is far from finished. You get to write it. You are the one who is the narrator of it. And just take that sense of power back and don't give it to anybody else, especially that piece of information, your results, as Doctor said so nicely. It's just information. We thank you for your time, Doctor, because I think it is a very
Thank you, Mr.
overwhelming period. I've spoken to many students that are waiting for their matric results and they are quite anxious. So hopefully this just helps shift the perspective of how they're seeing it, because everything is just about perspective. Shift the perspective and obviously you shift your whole experience. It's been an absolute delight having you on Urban Woman this morning, Doctor. And until we connect
Thank you,
again,
Radia. That's wonderful.
thank you so much. We should have a day
Thank
further.
you.
Bye for now.
Thank you. Bye.
And that was Dr. Fred Schouwink talking to us all around, basically urging matriculants to prioritize self-care. Please know that if your results are not exactly what you wanted, don't be harsh on yourself. Trust the process. And the question is, where to from here? It doesn't define you. You are incredible just the way you are. And the reason that you've been placed in this world is because you have amazing things still to do. Let's go for a break. I'll be back with you in a bit. It's Urban Woman with me, Razia Rangwe.